For part 2, the battle between Scott Atlas and Deborah Birx. Two people on the task force who absolutely hated each other and wrote a book about it. A Plague Upon Our House by Scott Atlas and Silent Invasion by Deborah Birx. I'm going to start with Dr. Birx's because she starts off earlier in the timeline. She was following the coronavirus from the beginning, watching it spread in China, and she was worried about it from the beginning because she had seen these kind of things before, and she kept hoping that it wasn't going to evolve the way it did, but it just kept getting worse and worse, and eventually she accepted the job on the task force. And when she got there, she was horrified to see that they were way behind on data collection, on data clarity, that the virus was just spreading every day, and there was nothing in place that was slowing it down or that was taking responsibility for it. So she went to the importance of masks, testing, social distancing, and limiting large gatherings. And she points out in the book that she had to do this very strategically. Because of the chaos in the Trump White House, she couldn't say exactly what she was thinking, which was, we need to lock the country down. This is a dire situation. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to die. In the book, she says she had to play chess. It's an analogy she used a lot throughout the book, that she has to use her pawns, not her queen and rook. She has to play it strategically so she can actually get something done. At this point, she's in line with the Scott Gottlieb book, pointing out the failures in the CDC. And that, of course, leads to the governmental shutdown in late March. Scott Atlas sees the lockdowns as extremely counterproductive and will have drastic side effects that apparently no one in the media was looking at. The effect of taking kids out of school, the effect of putting off cancer screenings and other medical procedures, the effect of social isolation at such a scale. That's his main point that he did not see being covered at all from any official source. And he talks about in the book how people he talked to were afraid to say anything like that because of the pressure to agree with the powers that were at the head of the country. He did a research paper with another scientist, and they concluded that for every month of these lockdowns, Americans were losing 700,000 life years. He goes on to criticize that the media and the government are both elaborating on what people don't know about the virus as opposed to what they do know. Specifically, that it's very age sensitive. You're at a very small risk if you're young, and you're a very large risk if you're old or with pre-existing conditions. He sees the coverage as panic-inducing, and he says we need a voice of reason, a voice to tell people to calm down. It's not likely to have an effect on you if you're young and healthy. Meanwhile, at the White House, Birx has urged for the shutdown of the government, which Trump listens to, and then it's soon after that Trump, according to Dr. Birx, completely turns his back on her and says, we're not doing this again. The cure can't be worse than the disease. And it's fierce resistance against her from that point onward. In July, Scott Atlas is asked to join the task force. And from the left, this is the president putting someone in a lab coat that justifies his opinions of what he wants to do, which is open up the country. It's pretty clear that Deborah Birx has the same opinion. It's funny, so funny reading these two books when they talk about their first meeting, because Deborah Birx doesn't trust him right from the beginning, but in her book claims that she comes at him with an open mind. They have this meeting, and according to her, she just talks for 90% of the time, and the only thing he'll say is, that's interesting, that's interesting, that's interesting, and that's it. According to her, he didn't disagree with her at all. And he just sat there, and then afterwards he went on some backhanded rampage against her behind her back. And so according to him, they first met, they exchanged pleasantries, they started talking about different things, and he brought up the question of masks, and he asked her what studies of masks she thought were most relevant, and then she brings up a study, and then he talks about how silly that was. So I cannot put those two stories together at all. I have no idea what happened. One or both of them are lying. But as the time goes on with the task force, both of them claim that they're the ones that have the studies, they're the ones that have the evidence, and then the other people, they don't bring up the studies once. Which is funny how symmetric it is. According to Dr. Birx, Scott Atlas was basically a mix between Rasputin and Alex Jones. Very bombastic and very evil. It's pretty explicitly in the book she talks about this poisonous voice going through the White House and spreading to the country. It all starts with Scott Atlas whispering in people's ears. It's very, very evil, which is funny to read. It's hard to say who to believe, honestly, after reading it. I give a slight edge to Scott Atlas for a couple reasons. First, Dr. Birx strikes me as a very smart woman, but a woman that is very centered in her world. Her solution of masking, social distancing, limiting gatherings, it is the same through all the phases of the pandemic, which you'd think are so varied you'd want to change up your strategy. You'd want to talk about it from different angles. Things are very different in the beginning when you don't know what it is, to when it's slowly starting to spread, to when it's widespread, to when there's a vaccine, to when there's another variant, to another weaker variant with Omicron. But her message is so constant that I tend to distrust that she is adjusting to new data. There's also a point in the book where she talks about a study in Pennsylvania that justifies her prescriptions for states, because she's going around from state to state talking to governors, and she talks about what a success it is and how it's reducing cases. And then in Scott Atlas's book, he points out that she's talking about these successes, but they're successes relative to what her model predicted. So it's kind of circular logic. You have your model, and then you have your prescription, and the data is reinforcing your model. That seems deceptive to me. So what's my takeaway from reading these books? The United States needs to be more prepared for upcoming pandemics. I'm not clear that we are better positioned now. I think it still remains to be seen. There tends to be the pattern in politics that you just blame the other side for everything, and then you don't actually go to fix the problem. I'm not sure. I'm still kind of on the fence at whether we're better or worse prepared, because it has been a very divisive issue. But I'm hopeful that there are some points where we will be better off. That's kind of a hope in the sky, though, so we'll see what happens the next time a disease comes around.